get it or they don't. And I don't spend a lot of time with people that don't understand the value, because there definitely are folks that are out there that think, hey, fractional is a fad, or, one person working at fractional, we can't really move the dial. The first role we had, it was a chief revenue officer for a growth company, professional services company. And ultimately they kept running through like sales folks over and over and over and couldn't figure out why. They thought they just did a poor job with hiring salespeople, when it turns out that it's really kind of the go-to-market strategy, the approach. They needed to do some tweaks. So ultimately we brought in a chief revenue officer who did that. And man, it was glorious. I tend to differ from that opinion a little bit. I'm a big believer that, fractional execs brought in for some task, for some reason, maybe purse strings are a little tight, but their job should be to maximize value and ultimately work themselves out of a job.
Right.
And the majority of the time that we're brought in, company, maybe they got a funding round, maybe sales have flatlined, but there's some scenario and some issue that's like systemic within the company that they need to overcome and fix. And once that's fixed, ideally the fractional will roll off, or maybe they need to roll the perm, which we've done. And I'm a proponent for. I'm a big believer that that's a smart move for both company and a person.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm the managing partner at Epiphany Business Consulting and your host for today. I am so delighted to have you in the studio. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, this is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. And guess what? The best part of your day. Welcome to another episode. Today we've got Beau Billington in the studio. Beau, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a mouthful. People have been butchering my name my entire life. No worries, but I'm doing great, Rick, and about to take off for the Christmas holidays in 24 hours. Really excited.
Yes, that's outstanding. That's outstanding. I'm jealous. I'm going to be working. It's funny. It's like I think about marketing, and it's just like I know entrepreneurs have the bug, and they're going to be working, so I got to be communicating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's a misnomer. I'm not going to be 100% off. I'm gonna keep a pulse on things, but I am working the week after Christmas, between that and New Year's. So we'll see what happens.
Cool, man. Cool. That's awesome. Oh, let's just jump into this. You want to give us a little of your background, what you do, why you do what you do?
Absolutely. So probably one of the buzzwords of like 2023, 2024 is fractional. So I'm in the fractional space. I've been in the space for 7+ years. I think I'm one of the folks that helped coin the phrase fractional, for better or for worse. And started the business 7 years ago. Candidly, I think I was a little early, Rick, but ultimately we work with like high growth tech companies historically, although we're moving into manufacturing and some other sectors. We work with growth companies, typically revenue, call it 4, 5, 6 million in ARR to about 20 million. So, some seed, some bootstrap, some seed, pre-series A and some series A. And most of the companies we work with, we look for product market fit. They're not pre-revenue, and the founding team has a growth mindset, but ultimately we help pair them with like fractional experts. So it could be like, chief revenue officer, in a fractional capacity, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been doing that, and it's been a wild ride, man. It's been a lot of fun, and I've seen the space change more in the last year than any time in the preceding 6 years. So I feel like we're starting to hit that curve, which is really exciting.
That sounds exciting. You said you jumped into this a little bit early.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean?
So when I first started my company, it was 7.5 years ago. You want to hear the backstory of the why? All right, so I'll give you the Cliff's notes, but basically, it was my second daughter. It's going to be her first Christmas, I believe, and I had to fly to Toronto because a boss told me to fly to Toronto. Ultimately, a bad winter storm coming through. All my meetings got canceled, and I was sitting there at I think it's Courtyard Marriott at the bar, and I was miserable because I thought I wasn't going to make it back for Christmas, and so. Ultimately, I heard ESPN in the background, and they were talking about so-and-so's NBA. So-and-so is becoming a free agent, and so they're going to be in a position to choose, which team they want to go to. And that literally was a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my gosh, how cool would it be if I was a free agent? And I toyed with the idea for 2 years. It was scary. I made the business plan, jumped out eventually. And then when I jumped out, I started having conversations with people, and candidly, the concept just didn't really hit the way that I thought it would. People would respond with, well, why would I want a fraction of a person when I can just hire a full-time person? So I spent a lot of time on the education component, but that's how I got started. Eventually, we started doing a full-time headhunting as well, just to kind of, open up a revenue stream. But then, things kind of started to change over the last 3 or 5 years as the concept became a little bit more prevalent. More folks with agencies such as mine started popping up. And then also too, COVID kind of changed the work-life balance dynamic. And people started thinking about maybe leaving corporate America, some not on their own will. But it really is kind of like been interesting to watch this whole thing unfold over the last several years.
Wow, wow, wow. What was it like for your first client to kind of get that light bulb moment? Like, hey, this could work for my company. What was that like for you? And kind of like behind the curtain, what was it like for them, if you can imagine?
Well, it was scary, right? Because obviously the first deal, the first thing you close is terrifying because you don't know if it's going to work. The process is a bit rusty. Not everything has been kind of sussed out, but it was really, really interesting. The first role we had, it was a chief revenue officer for a growth company, professional services company. And ultimately, they kept running through like sales folks over and over and over and couldn't figure out why. They thought they just did a poor job with hiring salespeople when it turns out that it's really kind of the go-to-market strategy, the approach. They needed to do some tweaks. And so ultimately we brought in a chief revenue officer who did that. And man, it was glorious. I really like the project was fun. I was a part of it. And let me make sure this is clear. I've got no interest myself in consulting. Zero. I thought I would. I didn't. I don't. But it was really exciting kind of being part of that and seeing the light bulb moment with the customer, but also the talent. And then from my perspective, it's like, all right, there's validation now. How do we do it again and bigger and faster?
Yeah. How do you do it again? That's the ultimate question. How do we do it again?
And did you get lucky the one time, right? That's always too in the back of your mind.
Truth. You said never wanted to get into consulting. What's the difference between the two? Fractional versus consulting.
Sure. And there's a ton of viewpoints on what fractional is, what fractional is not, what consulting is, what consulting is not. I don't necessarily subscribe to one camp or the other, just to be candid. But as it pertains to myself, I don't personally have an interest in providing services at a fee where I'm the talent. I've actually kind of looked at my skill set, and I feel fairly confident 7 years in that my skill set is really kind of matching good people with companies that are in need. And so I thought originally when I was kind of coming up with the concept of free agent that I wanted to go work for companies. I was going to be the talent, but quickly I realized that that's probably not my best skill set. My best skill set is really kind of, creating a connection. And so that's what I meant with that comment about not wanting to provide consulting services.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're like the fractionals or the consultants agent where you're
I'm the intermediary. Yeah. So we kind of phrase that we're a conduit for opportunity. We were out, bird dogging, deal originator. We'll bring an opportunity to the table. We'll suss it out at a high level with the company, and then we'll go find the talent that we believe can help them overcome that challenge, connect the two. And then we basically move into like an account management capacity where we're around for the life of the project and making sure that, the client's happy with the deliverable. And then the what we refer to as the free agent is actually kind of engaged, enjoying the work and getting what they need from the client, which can be a challenge.
Yeah. Does the consultant or fractional, do they work for you or do they work for the end client?
So technically they're doing the work for the end client, obviously, but they do work for us. So we'll own the paper, the agreement with the end client. And then currently all the free agents or fractionals are 1099 with our company, with the goal of moving that to W-2, maybe 2025, 2026.
So they're going to come work for you as a W-2 employee. That's interesting. Okay. How does that change? So I guess when I think about a fractional leadership in particular, I think about, getting into a company, being part of that leadership team and, being really that personal accountability for the outcomes, but what I'm hearing from you is there's a slightly different dynamic where, again, I mean, you're the middleman, and, is that connection still the same between the fractional and the company?
Yeah.
Because you're involved, or?
Totally. I feel like we actually help enable that to
Yeah.
a greater degree because we are involved. And I mean, the fractional exec is going to tell me things that they're not going to tell the company and vice versa. So we've got a really good pulse on, the deliverable, if everything's going to scope, or not. And I feel like that's a good value add in regards to like the longevity of the project, but also the end product. So that the actual quality that the company receives from the folks that we kind of deploy.
Cool, cool. So what does that communication pipeline look like, between you and the company and between you and the fractional?
Mhm.
And then perhaps I don't know if all three of you get in the room together, or
We do.
how does that work?
Yeah. So typically what happens is we, bird dog an opportunity. I mean, when we're out kind of, we've got all the, cold calls and warm calls and digital footprint and all that stuff. But anyway, we come across an opportunity. We'll vet it out at a high level, get our arms
Mhm.
around budget, scope, and kind of, who they think that they need. We'll go into our virtual marketplace, do some queries, and ultimately try to find, 3 to 5 profiles that we believe can, overcome the challenge at hand. We'll have conversations with those people, kind of double vet them that they're the right person, the right budget, skill set, et cetera. And then ultimately we'll make an introduction to the client, and we typically will have kind of like a 3-way video or a 3-way meeting in person, where they get to know the talent. We're in the room, and then we help further with like proposal development, with scoping, with discovery, and then ultimately we kind of co-sell.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're a markup on top of the individual's typical rate. But we're flexible on that. The markup's actually transparent. So then we'll send a proposal kind of, over the fence to the client, and then kind of try to get it done collectively.
Got it, got
There's
it, got
value
it.
both
And
for the quote unquote free agent, but then also the company as well.
for sure, for sure. My question was actually about like during the engagement, you talked about, you talked about accountability and communication there. So how does that typically work?
Yeah, so we try to get into a cadence that works for everybody. I mean, the last thing we want to do is get on, busy founders' calendar weekly to have a conversation where maybe not much has happened, or, et cetera. Basically it's like around every 2 weeks or so is there is an email, and we try to set up a kind of a call every 3 weeks. And those are generally separate. So not everybody in the same room together, but a call with kind of the free agent, and then a call with the client as well, just to make sure that everything's moving according to plan. And then of course we've got, calendar reminders in regards to like the length, the duration, all that stuff. So we try to manage it as best we can, while keeping a pulse on things, but also kind of staying out of the way and not making a mess of it.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. What kind of feedback are you getting from, from your clients?
So, the way that I like to think of it, Rick, is that people either get what fractional is or what fractional can do, or they don't. And so the feedback that I get is typically very, very positive. I've had one project over the last 7 years that we had to shut down after 2 months, just because I can get into that later if you want. It wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the right engagement model. But generally these things are going to go, 3 months on the low end. And the longest we've had was actually, I think, 14 months or so. And the reason that was
Wow.
long is because it actually ended up going through COVID. And so
Yeah.
the scope of the relationship changed. But yeah, I mean, the feedback we get is very, very positive. And most of these folks are practitioners and can really kind of impact the business in a minimal amount of time.
But how long does it take? And maybe this is kind of what you were alluding to, but how long does it take for a company to kind of be acclimated to the idea of working with a fractional?
Again, this to me is kind of a foundational question that either they get it or they don't. And I don't spend a lot of time with people that don't understand the value, because there definitely are folks that are out there that think, hey, fractional is a fad, or, one person working a fraction of a week can't really move the dial. And those folks are obviously entitled to their own opinion, and sometimes maybe a full-time employee is the right decision. But generally people either get it or they don't. So I don't spend a lot of time with the folks that don't understand it. I will say that with kind of the demographics shifting a little bit, so the baby boomers retiring, some of the younger generation kind of stepping into leadership roles, it does seem like there is more of a willingness, or at least a general knowledge about fractional and an understanding of what it is and what it's not. And so I feel like the adoption curve is kind of ramping pretty rapidly.
If you could, take a look, 5, 10 years down the road, how was where I'm looking for? Let me ask it differently. Do you see fractional as kind of like the future of organizational development?
So let me preface it by saying I'm deeply biased. Yes,
As you
but
should be.
I do 100%. I mean, honestly, like, so, COVID changed the dynamic.
Uh,
Generation Z, I believe, and Y have changed the dynamic as well, where there's this interest in work-life balance, sometimes over the monetary component that you can get from working for an organization. And so, I'm very bullish on the fractional space, not just currently, but I think, in the next, call it 12 months to 15 months, we're going to see a significant move in that direction. And so, 5, 10 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if most startups kind of begin with a fractional leadership team. And then as they evolve, get a Series A, Series B, they do start kind of moving those puzzle pieces off the board and replacing them with full time. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see, 20, 30% of a company's genetic makeup in the next, 2, 3 years being comprised of fractional executives.
Got it. Got it. You said one of the things I'm curious about. You said that your fractionals typically roll off a project within 14 months. Is
That was an extreme example.
that
It's usually 6 to 9 months, somewhere in there, but 14 was a thing. Yeah.
okay? Okay. So they roll off within 6 to 9 months. What is typically, I guess, that change? Or I'm not sure how to articulate this, but it's I guess it comes down to why.
Yeah, no, that's another point of contention in the fractional space, where some folks believe that a fractional exec should come in and be embedded part of the company's executive leadership team and work with them indefinitely. I tend to differ from that opinion a little bit. I'm a big believer that, a fractional exec's brought in for some task, for some reason, maybe purse strings are a little tight, but their job should be to maximize value and
Yeah.
ultimately work themselves out of the job.
Right.
And majority of the time that we're brought in, company, maybe they got a funding round, sales have flatlined, but there's some scenario and some issue that's like systemic within the company that they need to overcome and fix.
Yeah.
And once that's fixed, ideally the fractional will roll off, or maybe they even roll to perm, which we've done. And I'm a proponent for. I'm a big believer that that's a smart move for both company and a person. But that's generally why they roll off, because they fix the problem. But let me just finalize that by saying a lot of times they also move into more of an advisory capacity, kind of, hours kind of ramp. And then over the course of, 6 to 9 months, they decrease.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. How much time does a fractional typically spend, with the company, if there's an average there?
Yeah.
I'm saying like hours per
Yeah.
week or per day or whatever.
Yeah. So what we found by trial and error is that there is a magic amount of hours. Projects can be too small and not have enough pain associated with them to keep the CEO interested in the engagement. And that's, again, a story that I kind of alluded to earlier, and I can get deeper on that one. But what we found is that typically a day, a week, so 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever you want to prefer that, whatever you want to prefer, and then plus. So generally, once you hit around the 20 hours per week mark, north of that, I mean, candidly, it may make more sense to bring in a full-time employee, just from a cost perspective. But generally, we try to lock up a day, day and a half, 2 days, up to 3.
Okay.
That's practice that we see also in the market with fractionals.
So not like half days at all.
I mean, ultimately, that's both the blessing and the curse of the fractionals, that you can do whatever you want to, right? You can find some kind of common ground between yourself and the company that's hiring you. I've just found that it is hard to move kind of the needle in a meaningful way if you don't have a certain amount of hours, and that's typically going to be a day plus. Again, my opinion, every company is unique and different, but that's what we've seen.
Yeah. So tell me, is this hybrid? Is this remote? Is this on site? What are you saying most of the time?
So we try to find folks that are local to companies mostly, but I'd say when it's all been remote, but if somebody's in the local town, it's encouraged for them to go visit and have a conversation. It's always better to sit down with somebody in person versus video or a phone call. But it's remote. I mean, people are just, when they've already kind of like resigned themselves that they're open to fractional work, they're already kind of a little bit more progressive as it comes to employment. And so typically being in office is a non-issue.
Okay. What happens when a company wants to make that fractional that full-time employee?
So there's companies that are very against that. There's other companies that promote that. I'm somewhere in between. I mean, I'm not going to try to kind of prohibit somebody from joining a company full time if they're happy, the company's happy, it's the right fit. We do have language in our agreement, and there is kind of a proration where, after a certain period, there's not a fee associated with them jumping ship. But candidly, Rick, I try to have that conversation on the front end to find out from the client if they're interested really in a full-time person, but they just want to kind of try before they buy. And then conversely with the fractional exec, if that's really what they're looking for, And I am seeing more and more executive level folks that are opting for contract first in hopes of going full time because they've gotten burned with BS shares or a company that once they got in, it was just kind of a complete and utter train wreck. But they, for whatever reason, generally financially felt handcuffed in that situation. But a lot of folks are
Wow.
opting for the try before you buy method, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. You gave us some breadcrumbs about this project that kind of I like the term crash and burn. It's probably
Yeah, yeah, that may be a bit of extreme. I mean, basically what it was is it was a $50 million company that was in need of a CFO. And we basically kind of concocted a plan that worked for the free agent, worked for the company, but it wasn't many hours. And so what we saw was that there wasn't enough financial skin in the game for the CEO to keep it top of mind. And so what we found was that after 2 months, the conversations, the meetings just kept getting pushed to the next month. And he'd pay the fee because it wasn't that big of a deal for him. But meanwhile, we saw that the quote unquote free agent felt a bit disenchanted. They were getting paid, they weren't doing the work, so they felt like they were kind of just in an awkward position. And so we eventually raised our hand after 2 months and just told the client like, hey, there's not enough hours here, probably not the right fit. But it was
got it.
the lesson learned from that, Rick, though, was there needs to be a certain level of pain associated with the hourly rate, with the engagement model. So the company and the CEO, their leadership team basically keeps it top of mind, keeps it a priority. Otherwise, any fractional exec's going to really struggle to do anything meaningful.
Wow, wow, that makes sense. Do you find a lot of companies that hire you guys are micromanaging? Trying to really, I guess, maximize their value, like down to the hour, or is it more of a partnership, if you will?
We definitely offer more the partnership type of model and typically kind of have like a hybrid retainer plus like hourly model. So like a baseline of hours. If there's significant overages, we do charge. But of course, the client agrees to that in advance typically. But we don't try to get into a position where people are, monitoring their hours, submitting a time clock. And again, we can and we will, but, it's got to be for a specific reason. And most importantly, the free agent has to be open to it because our target kind of demographic for the talent side of the house is senior leadership. And a lot of these folks just aren't going to punch a clock. It's not going to happen. And candidly, it's also tough when the client asks that because to me, they are going to be a little bit more anal and it can be tough, a sticky situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What other kind of clients? I mean, obviously, finance. You talk about pain points. Are there other projects that you really veer away from?
So I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently and talk about kind of the focus areas. So we basically have kind of three big buckets that we focus on mostly. And I mentioned what the ideal client profile looks like. But from like a discipline perspective, we focus within like the sales and marketing. That's one bucket. Tech and product, another bucket, and then operations and finance being a third bucket. You look across those three buckets, the last 2 years, the majority of work we've done has been within kind of a sales silo. So like go-to-market strategy, chief revenue officer type of work, and then the finance bucket. So, EBITDA, how do we do more with less? And a lot of that's just been because our focus is the tech sector, and there's been this lull where companies haven't hired and they've cared about two things, top line revenue growth and then EBITDA. And then what's really interesting too is that when we talk to the VC and private equity folks, typically the first fractional hire that they're only interested in is going to be the CFO. Whereas if we talk to a founding team in the tech sector, typically the first fractional person they'll bring in is going to be a CRO. So it's really, really interesting dynamics in the market. And it's pretty cool seeing how like one party favors one type of skill set over another one. But marketing is no slouch as well. I'd say marketing is probably coming in at a strong 3 in terms of like skill set and what we see in the market.
Interesting. Cool. Do you see your company getting involved in like base plus performance at all? Or are you guys just, so for example, you had mentioned that, you're trying to increase EBITDA or you're trying to, increase top line revenue. Do you see your company as saying, okay, if we can increase your revenue by X%, we get an additional bonus or something like that?
Yeah, we've definitely had some riders like that within the agreements, but they can be a little bit difficult also to pull off from time to time. So I'm a believer in success fees. That's what we kind of, refer to them in. And so the
Nice.
benefit for the company a lot of times is that, they can get the fractional at a bit of a discounted rate. right? So most of the folks are willing to kind of discount their rate because they're so bullish in their abilities that they can make more money here with some success. I will say it is difficult to kind of get that in an agreement and get both parties in agreement of kind of the verbiage. I wouldn't be surprised though if that, as fractional becomes more prevalent, that we don't see more success fees kind of in the future. But a lot of that too, just to kind of tie this off, depends on the person's personal situation too. If they're willing to take a smaller hourly rate, they need to be in a financial situation where they can afford to do so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's fluid. The answer, it's fluid.
Yeah, I get that. So if I'm an owner, I'm a founder, I've got a fractional CRO that's going to come in the company. Yeah, I got my wish. What am I expecting in terms of like that 1 or 2 days a week? What is that engagement like for me?
Oof, that's a tough one. And I've thought through how to standardize approaches, how to standardize pricing, and I don't feel there's a one size fits all because problems are different and unique, as well as the talent itself is unique, and most of the folks have their own approach. So it really can depend on the company's unique situation. So going back to the example you mentioned, CRO, we've done deployments where like CROs are helping to manage team members, right? So they're actually getting on calls, talking to account executives, working directly with them. I mean, acting as an embedded chief revenue officer. That's probably more so a VP of sales as the example, but working directly with the talent. And we've done other engagements where basically the talent's more on just the strategic layer, helping with like go-to-market strategy, pricing, messaging, and working directly with the executive leadership team. So it really depends. I know I didn't give you a definitive answer, but I mean, that's again, the beauty, the blessing and the curse of the fractional space is because the engagement can be literally anything.
Wow. Okay. Outside the project that you guys walked away from, what was most difficult? What was the most, I guess, challenging project you guys have had?
So, wow, I've got two. So one of the things that I've had to walk away from. So with my business, we've got a virtual marketplace, and we're about to launch the 5th version of it. And so this was the original concept of the free agent. It's probably a conversation for another day. But about 2 years in, once I realized kind of that fractional was a bit early, I had to abandon that project and put that on ice for about 2 to 3 years. So that personally was tough as an entrepreneur because like that was part of the vision is this marketplace where we can match talent and match companies. And it was just early. It was early. And we'll see if the timing's better this time around, right? In regards to a project, one of the toughest projects we did have was a CFO engagement. Company needed to bring on a CFO to kind of help with their books. They're thinking about going to market to position themselves to sell, and they wanted to get a higher multiple. Well, this engagement was going on, I think, for about a month, going swimmingly, and a suitor came to them, basically. And so the amount of work that was required from our CFO went from, I think we had a baseline of 10 hours a week, quickly to she was working between maybe 50 and 60 hours a week. And it spiraled quickly, and she was invaluable resource to the company. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, her work-life balance quickly got interrupted. And that was a tough situation because she was in the throes of helping this company get acquired, and she was the right person for the job. But it was just, it was a tough time because I didn't do a good job of setting expectations with the client. I don't think she did as well. And so we ended up completing the project. Everything went great, but and I'm not laughing at the situation or making light of it, but I think it had a lasting impact on her where she ended up going back full time because it was like, it became very, very, very intense work for, I think, a period of about 3 months.
Wow. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and just a kind of cautionary tale for any folks out there that are considering fractional. I think expectation setting with client is extremely important, critical. And I have seen folks that do get burned out where they themselves do a bad job of saying no, right? You take that one call after hours, it's a matter of time before you get that second call. And that compounds, particularly if you're talking 1 high growth company, 2 high growth company, 3 high growth companies. And I've seen people that go very, very quickly from, 30 hours a week, which is a nice lifestyle business, to 60 or 70. And that can burn folks out.
Yeah, I can picture that. Do you offer, I mean, with that said, I mean, do you provide any sort of training for for the folks on your team?
That's a great question, Rick. And that's something that I'm actively exploring is how we can have kind of a better onboarding process. And we put some pieces of the puzzle in play to help with that. A lot of what we do currently is more conversational. And so both with kind of like the talent, but then also the client kind of when we are getting the proposal, the scope, and the agreement done. But it is a critical part, because I mean, a lot of these high growth companies, every decision they make is the most important decision in their lives from their perspective. So their hair's on fire continuously, and it can burn out the talent if not managed properly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Have you ever placed a team or like multiple fractionals in a single company?
Yes. So that's really exciting. And that's why we stay broad, right? So that's the part of the entrepreneur. It's like, do you niche down and just kind of target just CS, chief revenue officers or just chief financial officers? But we stay broad because what we've found is that a lot of companies if they will deploy one, they're open to deploying many. So it will be less of a team where they're not working maybe in some concerted effort together, but more so we may have a couple of different skill sets within a client. So it could be chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer.
Wow. Okay. Okay, cool. And you said they do or they don't like team up?
I mean, they'll team up, but it's not like we're deploying like your tech guy. It's not like we're deploying like a UX designer with a developer that will work together in tandem, right? I mean, they're still kind of there to do their job specifically.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting. Wow. How quickly do you think this industry is going to grow? And I'm talking about in terms of like placement and
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
Hindsight's 2020. I always say, the next 3 or so years, and it's been 7, right? So it's been a slow growth curve. I mean, I'm very bullish that next year, 2025, and we're sitting December 19th as we have this conversation, 2024. I'm very bullish that next year is going to be a significant growth year for the fractional space, particularly if, some of the cost of capital decreases, private equity and VC start reinvesting. And also too, private equity and VC 7 years ago would almost laugh me out of a room. Now they're the ones that are more apt to answer my phone call. So I think they're going to drive a lot of this change. And so I'm confident that there will be some good growth within the space in 2025, but probably even more growth in 2026 and beyond.
Awesome.
It's happening.
Awesome.
This is not a fad. We're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. You heard it here, folks.
That's right. You heard it here first.
Awesome. Awesome. So if someone is interested in becoming a fractional, what kinds of things do they need to take into consideration, or what kind of background experience do they need to have?
So this question can be answered many different routes. So just 2 years ago, there weren't a lot of resources out there. But now there's communities. I literally had a call an hour ago with a company that does coursework. Mm-hmm. Like they actually have like a mastermind where they walk people through a 6-week course so they can learn about becoming fractional exec, best practices. Elementary is like setting up your business, setting up your LLC, and then moving into kind of like business development, billing, and all that stuff. So holistic. To answer your question from my perspective, I'm a big believer that the magic in the fractional space is the intersection of like background and passion. Mm-hmm. To me, like, yes, you can learn new skill sets, but it's going to be really hard to sell yourself into a brand new industry or discipline. So once somebody has kind of an understanding of their passion, their background, then I'm a big proponent in going real deep on like your ideal client profile, your ICP. Yeah. So you've got a good understanding as to, typical size companies that, would probably buy your service, what that service would look like, what you'd offer them. And then ultimately kind of working on the marketing blueprint and the sales blueprint from that point forward. But it starts to me with ICP and really sussing that out. Like, is there a business here? And I've talked to some people where they've told me, and I can't think of an example offhand, but they told me their idea and it sounds great, but it's like, I don't know if there's a market there. So you got to go deep on the research because there might not be.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. How important is industry experience? I mean, you've got, I'm a CRO going into a company, work with lots of companies. How important is a particular experience in a particular vertical?
It wasn't as important 2 years ago, but there is some saturation that's happening right now on the talent side. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. There is more supply than there is demand. We'll see if that shifts, and I'm confident it will as people go back to work full time. And of course, companies are more willing to hire fractionals. But because of that, I'm, again, big believer in like the ICP development and then leveraging your skill set into an opportunity that's, similar to the industry you just left. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of competition now. And it's hard for, somebody maybe in B2B SaaS to then go work for like a consumer goods company. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it can be challenging to jump across industries.
Yeah, definitely. How important is personal brand?
So I'm sure I'll say this, and some people will not agree with me, but I think it's critical, right? I mean, the first thing that I do personally would be somebody to Google them, and that's what folks do. And so to me, especially when you talk about the setting of the fractional exec, this is not full-time, but fractional exec, I think it's critical that you are out there. You do have a digital footprint. There is some maybe website that you have summary. There's maybe an affiliation with a company like mine or other communities, and that you're out there kind of sharing your brand and your genius, if you will, with the world. Otherwise, it's just there's a lot of competition, and it's going to be a little bit harder for you to market yourself, but also rise above the fray. And that's, to me, the entire purpose of digital marketing.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Branding.
So as a excuse me, as an exec, coming out of a full-time role, considering moving into a fractional role, I know we talked about some things, but what kinds of, I guess, cautionary things should I take into consideration?
Okay, so I'll just give you the kind of the spiel that I give most folks. First and foremost, I mean, it's a portfolio business generally. You need 2-3 opportunities to eclipse generally what you're making in corporate America. So that's one aspect to it. A second aspect is that I generally tell people that they should target a kind of an equitable split between the opportunities they're working on. So you don't have 80% of your income coming from one client. You've got 33 1/3 from 3. And finally, it is entrepreneurship at its core. You're ultimately a solopreneur, and if you're unwilling, unable to kind of get yourself out there, have conversations, network, market, it may not be the best fit, because it can be lonely, it can be gritty, it can be hard. The work is out there, but you do need to find it. And that being said too, I have talked to folks that are more introverted, but they have just a killer network. And they're able to kind of survive on the network and referrals, but that's not the norm. Most have got to go out there, meet people, uncover opportunities. And so there is kind of a sale component, but it's entrepreneurship 101 from my perspective.
Awesome. So if somebody was interested in joining your team, what would they need to do?
So first and foremost, hit our website and sign up. It's thefreeagent.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Beau, Beau Billington. And you can, on our website platform, you can basically kind of, create a bio. And so that gives myself as well as my team some cursory information on kind of you, your background. And I actually am a bit different from a lot of the networks and communities out there where everybody that's part of mine has been vetted. So I have a personal conversation. Now that's really hard to scale, and it's time consuming, and sometimes it's a drag, Rick, because I'm on the phone continuously. But reach out, fill out our form online, and then I'll end up giving them a phone call or shooting them an email and getting in touch that way.
Awesome. And if I'm a company, and I'm interested in working with one of your fractionals, what do I need to do?
It's more or less a similar process, right? So we basically on our website, we've got kind of 2 paths. Either you're kind of talent, so you're a free agent, or you're a company. In companies, the form is super easy to fill out. It's just kind of a contact us form. And we'll reach out generally within 24 hours. Conversely, too, I can be found on LinkedIn pretty easily. So just shoot me a note. I'm also too very quick to tell people when we're not the right fit, which is good.
Awesome. Beau, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been very educational for me. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
So first and foremost, Rick, really appreciate the conversation. Thanks for having me on, particularly as close to holidays as we are. Even though I know you said you're not going to take any downtime, but you need to. Trust me, you're gonna burn yourself out, man. But yeah, we've got a slew of services that we're about to roll out. Early 2025, like I'm talking maybe January 7th or so, first or second week. And ultimately, some of those services are going to be offered to the fractional talent themselves. From front office support, where basically we'll help them like with ICP, generation, but also like email automation, helping to get visibility. Also, record some highlight reel videos that they can share with clients, as well as the ability to have their profile posted on our website, and then a shareable URL, which essentially will act like an executive bio. So that's really exciting. We've also got a back office offering that we're rolling out as well, that helps on invoicing, time management, payroll processing, and then the almighty float, right? A lot of times you may have net 30 payment days. payment terms, but you're getting paid in 45 or 60. And so I've got a strategic partner I brought online that will basically help with the float component, which I think is a boon for the fractional exec. So some service offerings that just keep an eye out for. And man, I'm excited to hit 2025 running.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Beau, thank you so much. Folks, thanks for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Rick.
You bet, man.